Do you know what your core values are? If you do, it makes all kinds of decisions a lot easier. In this video, I'm going to explain briefly what values and core values are. I'll explain how to figure out what your core values are and then how to use those values to make decision making easier. Hey, how's it going? This is Scruffy Leadership, a YouTube channel about management and leadership. My name's Ben and I've been a leader and a manager in the tech industry for over 25 years. Your values are the principles that are most important to you. You might have dozens of values, but in this video, the ones we're most interested in are your core values, of which you probably only have a handful. Your core values are the red lines you won't cross or the essentials you need to feel satisfied with life and work. If you're working in a way that's in conflict with your core values, you won't be happy in that job. And if your work is nicely aligned with your core values, you're very likely to be very fulfilled and happy at work. Even if you don't know what your core values are, they still affect the way you act, the way you make decisions, and the way you feel about situations. But if you know what your core values are, then you can be much more deliberate about taking them into account. If you ever find yourself reluctantly making a decision and you're not really sure why you don't like it, it's probably because it conflicts with one of your values, or more likely one of your core values. So if you know what your core values are, you can avoid making those kinds of decisions, which are the ones you most likely are going to regret later. The list of possible values that people might have is effectively infinite. There isn't a finite list that contains every value or core value that someone might have. But here are some examples: accountability, being the best, cheerfulness, discipline, efficiency, fairness, generosity, health, independence, joy, kindness, loyalty, mastery, nobility, originality, patriotism, quality, restraint, selflessness, timeliness, uniqueness, vision, well-being, zeniality, zest. Now, there's no point trying to be pedantic about what constitutes a value. They're usually nouns, but they can be adjectives or verbs or even just vague concepts. If it's important to you, you don't have to justify it by squeezing it into a particular grammatical box. And as I listed those values, you probably found yourself resonating with some of them and feeling less attracted to others. This in itself might be an indication of what some of your values are, but in reality, for most of us, our values are hidden pretty deep below layers of societal conformity. Meaning, for example, that if you have a value of being the best, you might find that society's expectation of the value of humility means you can't easily acknowledge it. So for that reason, once you've figured out what your values are, it's a good idea to occasionally reassess them. It's also possible for your values to change, but this usually only happens over a long period of time or as a result of a really major life event. A good example of this is that when someone has their first baby, they might find that their core value of family gets a boost in priority. Okay, so how do you figure out what your core values are? Now, this is by its nature an imperfect process, and the more time you can spend on it, the more likely it is that you'll come away with a clear sense of your values. The first step is to take a list like this one and identify the values that resonate for you. Now, don't think super deeply at this stage. Just pick out the ones that feel like something you care about, something that matters to you personally. You can pick as few or as many of them as you like, so treat it as a purely binary decision. For each item, does it feel like it might be one of my values or not? As an example, you might look at selflessness. Now, there's part of you that's probably thinking, well, of course I'm selfless. And another part of you that knows that actually that's because as a society, we value selflessness. But this is not a judgmental process. Even very kind people might not have selflessness as a core value, and that's okay. So try to be as honest as you can, but don't worry too much about getting it perfect. Okay, now you have a starting list. Next, you need to think back over times in your life, either at work or elsewhere, when you were happiest, when you were most proud of yourself, and when you felt most fulfilled by what you were doing. Write them down as briefly as you can so that you'll remember what they are and what they mean. So your list might look like this. Now, go through the list of candidate values again and see if any of the ones you've not already picked can help explain why you've listed these memories. Maybe you remember that a time you were particularly happy was when you got a particular project completed early, and this helps you realize that timeliness is a value for you. Next, think about what situations in life really annoy or frustrate you. What are the things that happen to you or that other people do or even that you yourself do that really rub you up the wrong way? Write these down and then repeat the previous exercise. So try to figure out why these things affect you this way. I remember, for example, realizing a long while ago that one of the things that upset me most at work was when someone else caused me to be late for a meeting. Now, maybe this tells me that not only is timeliness a value for me, but also something like autonomy or being in control. Finally, think about people you really admire or whose behavior you want to model your own on. What qualities do they have that you particularly admire? What values might those qualities reflect? Add those to the list if they're not already on it. Throughout this process, feel free to delete values if you think they're duplicates or if they start to feel like they're not as important as others on the list. And in some cases, you might be able to combine values together. For example, maybe you've got growth, learning, and personal development listed as 3 values. Well, those could probably be combined into one with whatever label feels right to you. Now, if you end up with something like, let's say, 12 or fewer values listed, you can move on to the final step. If you have more than that, if you have more than 12, you need to go through the list and either delete or merge until you have around 12. Again, don't think too deeply about this, just go with your gut. Okay, so now you have your list of at most 12 values. The final step is to rank these core values and then pick your top 5. Okay, so start by taking a look at the top 2 values in your list. Ask yourself which one is more important to you. If you found yourself in a situation in which these 2 values were in conflict, which one would you pick? If you have absolutely no idea, don't worry, just move on. But in most cases, you should be able to make a judgment like this. If they end up already being in the right order, just leave them alone. But if they're the wrong way round, swap them over. Now move on to compare item 2 with item 3 and do the same thing. Swap them if they're the wrong way round, leave them if they're not. Once you've gone through the whole list once, go back up to the top and repeat the process. This is going to take a while, but you'll probably find you can make shortcuts, like realizing that an item near the bottom is actually way more important to you than another item that you can see near the top. So just move the bottom one up above the top one. After a while, you'll find the list is about right. It doesn't have to be perfect, and there'll always be a sense that some items might not be quite in the right place or there's kind of ambiguity. But as long as there's nothing that really jumps out at you as being wrong, stick with it. So this is now your ordered list of core values. It's a good idea at this point to put the list away and not think about it for a few days. Come back to it maybe a few days later and look it over. Does it still feel right? Is there anything obviously wrong? How do these values make you feel? Do you feel proud of them? How would you feel about telling these values to your friends or colleagues? If you realize that one of your core values is something you wouldn't want to admit to anyone, that doesn't mean it's not a core value, but it does mean you probably have some work to do. At this stage, you should probably pick the top few as your core values to remember. Something like 3 to 5 is about right. Write them on a post-it note or print them out and stick them to your laptop or on the wall above your desk where you'll see them every day. And now, when you find yourself with a tricky decision to make, or you find yourself in a situation where you don't understand your own reaction, refer back to this list, work through the values in order and ask whether each one might be helpful in the current situation. A lot of the time, you'll probably find that they are helpful. And the more you come to trust that your values, your core values, are really what matters to you, the more you'll be willing to use them and able to use them in this way. As an example, if you have a decision to make and you realize that the obvious choice conflicts with one of your core values, you should be able to understand something like, I know that everyone wants to go with the quick option, but that conflicts with my core value of thoroughness. So I'm going to propose going with the more careful approach. Now, you might feel comfortable explaining that to other people, or you might not, but either way, at least you know what it is about the obvious choice that feels wrong to you. This doesn't mean that you'll always get everything right, or that other people should listen to you just because of your values. That isn't the point. Values aren't right or wrong, they're just a part of who you are. The point is just that if you make all your decisions consciously taking into account your values, you'll be much less likely to find yourself unexpectedly miserable. Another situation in which values can be really helpful is in deciding whether to stay or leave a job. You might leave a job for positive reasons, like having an amazing opportunity, but sometimes we leave a job because it makes us stressed or unhappy. If you feel like that, you can start by asking yourself if this is because something about the job conflicts with your core values. If it does, that probably means it's the wrong job for you, or you need to find a way to negotiate a change that stops it from conflicting in that way. If you want to go the whole hog, there's 2 more steps you can take. The first is to write down not just the single word or phrase that identifies each value, but to write a sentence or 2 explaining what it really means, why it's important to you. You could add this to the printout you put above your desk, for example, both to remind yourself of what your values mean, but also perhaps to explain to any curious colleagues that pass by your desk. Second, you could run through your values and identify all the ways in which your work life is in conflict with your values. This could be at a very small level. For example, someone keeps leaving dirty cups in the sink and this conflicts with your value of cleanliness or tidiness. Or they could be at a much more significant level. Maybe you have a core value of honesty, and at a fundamental level, you feel that your role requires you to be dishonest with partners. Okay, write all these conflicts down. Now you can think through what you can do about them. In the case of the dirty teacups, you can probably find a fairly mild remedy. But in the case of the role that is creating conflict with your core value of honesty, it might be that you really need to find a different job. So you can work all this together into a plan. It can require whatever period of time you think is reasonable. Maybe it's a plan you can execute in just a few days or weeks if the conflicts are pretty mild, or maybe it'll take a year. Either way, you can create a plan with a set of clear goals and milestones and a sense of how you're going to achieve each one. I think one of the biggest causes of stress at work is living in a way that is in conflict with your values, but having no sense of a path forward to fix that. Even if the path is a long one or even a scary one, just having that pathway can help you to reduce the stress. And if it works, you'll finish the plan with no conflicts at all. I think humility is one of the most important values a leader can have. If you want to know why, check out the video that's on screen now. And if you have thoughts or questions about values and core values, why not share them in the comments below? And the same goes if you have any ideas for subjects you'd like to see me cover in future videos. Bye. See you soon.